Hello. So for at-home OChem project, my roommate and I decided to temper chocolate. And the basic science behind tempering chocolate is that chocolate contains cocoa butter, and cocoa butter has many different crystal structures, and all of these different crystal structures melt at certain temperatures. And so the most favorable crystal structure of chocolate is the V or 5 crystal structure. And so people temper chocolate to try and get all of the chocolate in this 5 crystal structure. And so the basic procedure for it is that you have to get good quality chocolate and you have to chop it pretty finely so that it can all melt pretty uniform. And then you have to melt the chocolate to about 110 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit so that all of the chocolate melts into a liquid, so none of it has any sort of crystal structure. And then you add extra chocolate, and you can stir and cool until the chocolate cools down to about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 81 degrees Fahrenheit. And that process allows some form 5 crystals to form, and then allows some of the 4 form crystals to form as well. But then we don't want the form 4 crystals, so we also have to reheat the chocolate up to 84 degrees Fahrenheit and then cool it back down. And reheating that chocolate breaks down the form 4 crystals and allows all those form 4 crystals to reform into form 5 crystals. So theoretically that works, but the process was a little bit difficult in an IV kitchen, and so I'm going to show the process right after this, and then I'm going to go through more of the chemistry and kind of different things that we tried after. So enjoy the process. A really important point when tempering chocolate is to not let water get into the chocolate. And that's because when the chocolate is allowed to cool too quickly, what happens when water mixes in is then it doesn't have time to form a good crystal structure. And so, of course, we had to try it. And so, as you can see, it gets really clumpy and gross in texture-wise when you add water to the chocolate. So some characteristics of tempered chocolate are that it has a higher melting point than untempered chocolate, because tempered chocolate is supposed to have a very uniform crystal structure, which, as we've learned in in Chem 6BL and 6AL, when something has a uniform crystal structure without impurities, its melting point or boiling point or melting point will increase because there's no impurities in the lattice. And so the same thing happens with chocolate. When it has a crystal lattice of just that type 5 crystal, its melting point increases because the crystal lattice is uninterrupted by other crystal structures. And so that is a big characteristic of tempered chocolate that I'm gonna show next. And then additionally, tempered chocolate is also supposed to snap when it breaks. And so I'm about to show kind of the results of our tempering chocolate, and you're gonna see that we chose 2 different ways of cooling the chocolate. We cooled the chocolate completely at room temperature, which theoretically should work because tempered chocolate should be hard at room temperature. And then we also cooled it in the freezer just to try different options. And so you'll see that with the freezer chocolate, it seemed more tempered and it snapped when it broke. But then with the just normal room temperature chocolate, it was a lot more malleable. And so that's kind of why we're not really sure if we tempered correctly or not. But we had a lot of fun during the process. So.
Go.
Just one last scientific point that I want to make is that if we were to have used dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate, because we tempered milk chocolate, all of those melting points that I mentioned at the beginning would have actually been higher. And just like how we learned in Chem Lab, anything that has impurities in its lattice is going to have lower melting points because those impurities get in the way of intermolecular bonding or like any sort of lattice forces. And so dark chocolate tends to have less milk and additives than milk chocolate does. And so that causes all of the melting points for dark chocolate to be higher in comparison to milk chocolate. So anyone who wants to go temper chocolate at home, make sure that you look up the correct melting points for the type of chocolate that you're using. And then additionally, I mentioned this at the beginning, but you need to use high quality chocolate so that it has less additives and is more just the chocolate and cocoa butter and things like that. So you don't want to use chocolate chips. You don't want to use chocolate that's in candy bars. You want to try and get a really good quality chocolate. And if you look at any recipe for tempering chocolate, they give a lot of good examples of those. So have fun trying it at home if anyone wants to try.